Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janabalabha Giri Bardari. Yasoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Paravatikacharya, Tadasata Shri Śrimad. Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki, Grantarad Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki, Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some devotees, all glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees, all glories to Sri Sri and Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatanbitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So today we are on Canto 3, Chapter 22, Text 7. Oh, this is what we have. Dishtya tvayan shishtoham Dishtya tvayan shishtoham Kritas chanu graho mahan Kritas chanu graho mahan Apavritaya karna run dry. Apavritaya karna run dry. Tushtadishyo shatir gira. Tushtadishyo shatir gira. Tushtyatvayanu shishtoham. Kritas chanu graho mahan. Apavritaya karna run dryer. Justadishyo shatir gira. Drishyatvayanu shishtoham. Kritas chanu graho mahan. Apavritaya karna run dryer. Dushyadishyo shatir giraha. Dishyatvayanu shishtoham. Kritas chanu graho mahan. Apavritaya karna run dryer. Dushyadishyo shatir giraha. Drishtyatvayānushishtoham Kritaschānugraho mahan Apavartai karna randrayar Dushyadishyo shatir gitaha. Vaishnavis. Drishtyatvayānushishtoham Kritaschānugraho mahan Apavartai karna randrayar Dushyadishyo shatir gitaha Drishtyatvayānushishtoham Kritaschānugraho mahan Apavartai karna randrayar Dushtashishyo virgita. Dishtya, luckily, tvaya, by you, anushishtaha, instructed, aham, I, kritaha, bestowed, cha, and, anugraha, favor, mahan, great, apavritai, open, karna randrai, with the holes of the ears, jushta, received, dishtya, by good fortune, ushatihi, pure, gitaha, words. So the entire translation of this verse reads in English, I have fortunately been instructed by you, and thus great favor has been bestowed upon me. I thank God that I have listened with open ears to your pure words. So, responsively, I have fortunately been instructed by you, and thus great favor has been bestowed upon me. I thank God that I have listened with open ears to your pure words. So here is Prabhupada's somewhat lengthy purport here on this verse. Srila Rupa Goswami has given directions in his Bhakti Rasamrta Sindhu on how to accept a bona fide spiritual master and how to deal with him. First, the desiring candidate must find a bona fide spiritual master, and then he must very eagerly receive instructions from him and execute them. This is reciprocal service. A bona fide spiritual master or saintly person always desires to elevate a common man who comes to him, because everyone is under the delusion of Maya and is forgetful of his prime duty, Krishna consciousness. A saintly person always desires that everyone become a saintly person. It is the function of a saintly person to invoke Krishna consciousness in every forgetful common man. Manu said that since he was advised and instructed by Kardama Muni, he was very much favored. He considered himself lucky to receive the message by oral reception. It is especially mentioned here that one should be very inquisitive to hear with open ears from authorized sources of the authorized source of a bona fide spiritual master. How is one to receive? One should receive the transcendental message by oral reception. The word karna randrai means through the holes of the ears. The favor of the spiritual master is not received through any other part of the body, but the ears. This does not mean, however, that the spiritual master gives a particular type of mantra through the ears in exchange for some dollars. And if the man meditates and achieves perfection and becomes God, and if the man meditates that he achieves perfection and becomes God within 6 months. Such a reception through the ears is bogus. The real fact is that a bona fide spiritual master knows the nature of a particular man and what sort of duties he can perform in Krishna consciousness, and he instructs him in that way. He instructs him through the ear, not privately, but publicly. You are fit for such work in Krishna consciousness. You can act in this way. One person is advised to act in Krishna consciousness by working in the DT room. Another is advised to act in Krishna consciousness by performing editorial work. Another is advised to do preaching work. And another advised to carry out Krishna consciousness. In the cooking department, there are different departments of activity in Krishna consciousness, and a spiritual master, knowing the particular ability of a particular man, trains him in such a way that by his tendency to act, he becomes perfect. Bhagavad Gita makes it clear that one can attain the highest perfection of spiritual life simply by offering service according to his ability. Just as Arjuna served Krishna by his ability in the military art, Arjuna offered his service fully as a military man, and he became perfect. Similarly, an artist can attain perfection simply by performing artistic work under the direction of a spiritual master. If one is a literary man, he can write articles and poetry for the service of the Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. One has to receive the message of the spiritual master regarding how to act in one's capacity, for the spiritual master is expert in giving such instructions. This combination of the instruction of the spiritual master and the faithful execution of the instruction by the disciple makes the entire process perfect. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes in his explanation of the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayamika Buddhi, that one who wants to be certain to achieve spiritual success must take instruction from a spiritual master as to what his particular function is. He should faithfully try to execute that particular instruction and should consider that his life and soul. The faithful execution of the instruction which he receives from the spiritual master is the only duty of a disciple, and that will bring him perfection. One should be very careful to receive the message from a spiritual master through the ears and execute it faithfully. That will make one's life successful. Dishtyatvayanu kritaschanu graho mahan apavritai karna randrayar jushtadishyo shatir gidaha. I have fortunately been instructed by you, and thus great favor has been bestowed upon me. I thank God that I have listened with open ears to your pure words. This chapter of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 22, has been sectioned by Burijan in his unveiling his lotus feet into 3 sections. The first, I think, is 14 verses 1 through 14 is where we are right now, and that is where Swayambhuva Manu offers his daughter Devahuti as a wife for Kardam Muni. We will find later on that Devahuti had already set her mind on Kardam Muni by hearing about him. She didn't have any pictures of him, but by hearing about him, she was fixed on Kardam Muni. And Kardam Muni had decided to marry. At least he approached the Supreme Lord. We read about that earlier. He approached the Supreme Lord, and when the Supreme Lord understood Kardam Muni's desire, he predicted that Swayambhuva Manu was on the way to give him Devahuti's hand in marriage, and of course that is now happening. That's what's exactly happening. So 1 through 14 is this offering of Swayambhuva Manu of his daughter Devahuti in marriage to Karda Muni. Then from 15 to 21, we have Karda Muni accepting. And then from 22 through 29, or 39, I think it is, 22 through 39. Then we have the last section, which is Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, returns to his kingdom. So that's kind of the lay of the land of this particular section of Śrimad Bhāgavatam. So we are going to learn about Karda Muni becoming married, and then later on he will have 9 daughters, and finally Karda Muni will have one son with Devahuti named Kapila Dev, who will be an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and will discuss the Sankhya philosophy with his mother. So today's theme is the spiritual master. Of course, that's a broad subject in Krishna consciousness, quite a broad. In fact, we have a whole course on it that's about 30 or 40 hours worth of stuff. We call it the IDC, the ISKCON Disciples Course. And those who want to become initiated are obliged to take this course to understand what they're getting into and how to choose a spiritual master and all the ramifications of that. And we can understand that a spiritual master is absolutely essential for spiritual life. And I wanted to start off with the fact that in the first paragraph, Prabhupada talks about the nectar devotion of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is written by Rupa Goswami. And in the first paragraph of Nectar of Devotion 6, we have Rupa Goswami speaking about the nature of accepting a bona fide spiritual master. Let's see, is that on this machine here? Yeah, it's, if you go to Nectar of Devotion 6, right at the very beginning, yes, here. Srila Rupa Goswami states that his elder brother, Sanatana Goswami, has compiled Hari Bhakti Vilas for the guidance of Vaishnava, and therein has mentioned many rules and regulations that are to be followed by the Vaishnavas. Some of these are very important and prominent. And Srila Rupa Goswami will now mention these very important items for our benefit. The purport of the statement is that Srila Rupa Goswami proposes to mention only the basic principles, not the details. For example, a basic principle is that one has to accept the spiritual master. Exactly how one follows the instructions of his spiritual master is considered a detail. For example, if one is following the instructions of his spiritual master, and that instruction is different from the instructions of another spiritual master, this is called detailed information. But the basic principle of acceptance of a spiritual master is good everywhere. Although the detail may be different, Srila Rupa Goswami does not wish to enter into details here, but wants to place before us only the principles. And here we go. This is what he basically says. He mentions the basic principles as follows. 1, accepting the shelter of the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. 2, becoming initiated by the spiritual master and learning how to discharge devotional service from him. 3, obeying the orders of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. 4, following the footsteps of great acharyas or teachers under the direction of the spiritual master. 5, inquiring from the spiritual master how to advance in Krishna consciousness. 6, being prepared to give up anything material for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This means that when we are engaged in devotional service of Krishna, we must be prepared to give up something which we may not like to give up, and we must also have to accept something which we may not like to accept. 7, residing in a sacred place of pilgrimage like Dvaraka or Vrindavan. 8, accepting only what is necessary or dealing with the material world only as far as necessary. 9, observing the fasting day on Ekadasi. And 10, worshiping sacred trees like the banyan tree. So these are some basic things that Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Devotion about the spiritual master. We understand that the spiritual master is necessary in the life of a devotee, because although we have Vedic literature and we can read the Śrimad, Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, etc., we might misunderstand, or we may not understand at all some aspects. And so that's what the purpose of the spiritual master is. The spiritual master helps us to understand those aspects of the Vedic literature that we can't grasp for one reason or another, or that we misunderstand. That's probably even worse, because often a devotee may think that he understands what the Vedic literature is saying, but may have a misconception of it. And how would the devotee ever recognize that they have a misconception unless the spiritual master was there? So this is why the process of accepting a spiritual master is essential. In fact, in the Nectar of Devotion 2, we have Ado Shada Tatu Sadhu Sangha Tabhajana Kriya Tanarta Nivrsis Shata Nishta Ruchis Tataha Atta Shaktis Tatabhavas Tata Prema Abhyudanshati Sadhakanam Ayam Premna Pradurbhave Bhavet Kramaha. So this gives us 9 stages of devotional service. Ado Shada, we start with faith, then there's Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha is associating with devotees. And the third is Bhajana Kriya. So Bhajana Kriya is accepting a bona fide spiritual master and taking initiation. So that's kind of stage 3. We have some faith that there is this process called bhakti and we should look into it. We associate with devotees, we get strengthened in that understanding. And then number 3 is we take initiation from a spiritual master and follow instructions under his guidance. So in the purport, you may have noticed that the predominance of what Prabhupada is describing in that purport had a lot to do with the idea that the spiritual master understands what Prabhupada coined the term psychophysical nature of the disciple. And therefore, the spiritual master understands what kind of service would be the most appropriate for a person of a particular kind of mentality and physical demeanor and skill set. So therefore, a spiritual master, as Prabhupada puts it in the purport, may ask someone to go on the altar, may ask someone else to do book distribution, may ask someone else to be a manager, someone else to be a cook, someone else to be a financial accountant or whatever it might be. So a person might render any number of different services. And because we are devotees in Daivi Varnashram Dharma, sometimes we may be asked to do something that does not exactly follow our psychophysical nature. So in the regular Varnashram system, there would be no question of performing an activity that was not our Varna, we have Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. So in the regular Varnashram system, you would never ask a Vaishya to do Sudra work, or a Kshatriya to do Brahman work, or a Brahman to do Vaishya work. You would never do that. But in the Daivi Varnashram system, you might ask anybody to do anything. And that's why when Prabhupada started the movement, he didn't have any brahmanas, but they were absolutely essential to get the movement started. So he kind of, jury-rigged a bunch of Western militias who had really not much going for them upstairs, and created a movement based on them. And eventually, through purification and reading, and they became more competent to perform the true duties of a brahmana. And so every society needs all these things, and so sometimes the spiritual master assigns, and usually he assigns according to the nature of the disciple, but again, sometimes not. So there are reasons for doing both things. The process of spiritual life must be an interaction with the spiritual master. Sometimes people think of the guru as a trophy or a one-time, concept that we, take initiation, and then once we've taken initiation, then we are permanently saved. Whatever we do is taken care of by the spiritual master, and because he's accepting our karma, we can do anything. And sometimes people have a very superficial notion of how to interact with the spiritual master, that we have a spiritual master, and once a year when he's in town, we come and we offer some prasad to him, and we offer many flowery words, and then the minute he leaves, we go back to our whatever we were doing before, which didn't have much to do with spiritual life, because we are just in a superficial connection. But, Bhagavad Gita, we have 434, Tadvidi Pranipatena, or is it 436? Tadvidi Pranipatena Paraprashnena Sevaya Upadekshyanti Te Jnanam Jnaninas Tattvadarshana. So just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So this is, of course, a key verse. And it's interesting, too, that if you look at chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita, that's a chapter called Transcendental Knowledge. And so Krishna is explained to Arjuna all aspects of knowledge, various things. And finally, after speaking about how important knowledge is, he explains where you're going to get it. And you get it from the spiritual master. Tadvini pranipatena paraprashnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. So, as Prabhupada puts it in the purport of that verse, pranipatena is by approaching, paraprashnena is worship, and sevaya is performing service. So by submissive inquiries, so by approaching submissive inquiries and service. So one approaches a bona fide spiritual master, one asks submissive questions, and one renders service. So this is actually a non-superficial way of relating to the spiritual master. Those three things, pranipatena, pariprashnena, and sevaya. Pranipatena is approaching, pariprashnena is submissive inquiries, and sevaya is service. So if we don't clear our doubts or our misunderstandings, or our lack of understandings from the spiritual master, then we really are not engaged in a deep relationship with the spiritual master. We have to do that. Of course, that doesn't mean that we have to email a spiritual master every other day or something like that. But the point is that the spiritual master is there to clarify. He's there to clarify. And as we discovered in the purport of this verse, not only is he there to clarify, he's also there to give the disciple a direction or a main service in spiritual life. So we have that aspect as well. And of course, this is very important because it's very difficult sometimes to understand the deep nature of spiritual life. So in the Mahabharata, in the Vanaparva, section 313, verse 117, we have Tarko. This is actually cited in, where is it? Madhya 17:186. Madhya 17:186. Tarko pratishta shruyato vibhina nasa vrishiryasya matam nabinam dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yenagata sapanta. So this is another reason why we need a spiritual master. Tarko pratishta shruyato vibhina nasa vrishiryasya matam nabinam dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yenagata sapanta. That Tarko pratishta, not by argument will we understand the supreme truth. Sruyato bibinam, not even by reading the Vedas will we understand the supreme truth, because the Vedas apparently seem to say different things. They really don't, but if you understand them, they don't. But if you don't understand them, they appear to. And then we have Nasa Vrishir Yasya Matam Nabinam, that a great Muni or a great philosopher will not make a name for himself if he doesn't differ with the opinions of previous philosophers. So therefore, those three things are out. Just arguing or just reading the Vedas on your own, or this idea that one can take philosophy and listen to various speakers. So how do we find it? So dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yenagata sapanta. The solid truth of spiritual life is hidden in the heart of the pure devotee. Therefore, as the Shastras confirm, one should follow whatever progressive path the Mahajans advocate. So that's basically where we get the understanding of what's the bottom line. Because although the basic tenets of spiritual life are there, the spiritual master not only adjusts them for the individual disciple, but he may adjust them in a larger scale for the entire devotional community that is a part of his preaching circle. So this is adjustments that need to be made. And sometimes what we need is to know what's more important and what's less important. Because if we take a principle that's less important and we elevate it, and we take a principle that's more important and we demote it, then we will do the wrong thing. We will have the wrong priority tree. So some things are more important and some are less important. And to put things in proper perspective is what the spiritual master is there to help us with. So that's also very important. And we have Yasya Deva Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tatagaro Tasyaite Katita Hyarta. What is it? prakashante mahatmana, that if one actually has faith in the spiritual master, and the Vedas, one has faith in what is it, the spiritual master, and what's the other thing? The Supreme Lord, right? The Supreme Lord and the spiritual master. All the imports of the Vedas are automatically revealed. Then we have Acharya Mam Vijanayan Navamanyeta Karhichit. One should accept the spiritual master as my very self, and one should never envy him, understanding him to be the representative of all the demigods. So there are many verses like this, and they all have to do with understanding the importance of the spiritual master in the disciple's life. And they all have to do with understanding what are the qualifications of the spiritual master. So we have Vacho Vega, Manasakrota Vegam, Jiva Vega, Udara Pasta Vegam, Etan Vega, Yovisha Heta Dhiran Sarvamapimam, Pritivimna Shishat. Somebody tell me what that verse says. Yeah, that's actually Upadeshamrita 1, I think it is, isn't it? What's that?
First verse.
Vacho Vegam, Manasakrota Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udara Pasta Vegam, Etan Vegan, Yo Vishaheta Dhira Sarvamapi Mam, Pritivim Sasisyat. So these are listing some qualifications of the spiritual master, and those qualifications are what?
A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world.
Right. So Prabhupada says that these three things are these pushings, actually. Vegam means pushings, are in a straight line. Tongue, belly, genitals, anger, mind, and words. So if one can control the tongue, then one is able usually to control the belly. And if one controls the belly, then usually one has no problem controlling the genitals. So if one doesn't control the tongue, then one won't control the belly, then one will be agitated. So there, and of course, anger, mind, and words are also very difficult to control. But these 6 pushings are the hallmark of someone who has actually managed to engage in true, deep spiritual achievement. So where is the possibility that one will be a spiritual master and yet have sensual liaisons with his disciples or so? So this is definitely a sahajiya concept, So one will not be controlling the genitals, certainly in that case. And anyone who claims to be a spiritual master and is engaging in this kind of activity is obviously not a spiritual master, at least according to Vedic scriptures. So this is very important considerations. Then also the importance and the qualification of spiritual master is described in Tasmad Gurum Prapadyetam Jigyeshu Shreyam Itamam Uttamam. What is it? Tasmad Gurum Prapadyetam Jigyeshu Tat Paret Dishtatam Brahmani Upasamashrayam. Right. Tasmad, that is 11. Yeah, 11. Yeah, 11.321, right. Tasmad Gurun Prapadye Tam Tasmad Jigeshu Shreyam Uttamam Shabde Parecha Nishna Tam Brahmani Upasamashrayam Tasmad Gurun Prapadye Tam Jigeshu Shreyam Uttamam Shabde Parecha Nishna Tam Brahmani Upasamashrayam. So one who seriously desires spiritual life must approach a bona fide spiritual master and take initiation from him and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualifications of such spiritual masters that they have seen the truth by deliberation and can convince others of that truth. Such advanced spiritual guides who've left aside all material things are to be understood as bona fide spiritual masters. So the qualification of a spiritual master, he has seen the understanding of the Vedas through deliberation and can convince others of such conclusions in the face of opposing conclusions. Such people who have taken full shelter of the Supreme Lord, leaving aside all material considerations, are to be understood as bona fide spiritual master. And again, at the very beginning of that verse, we have anyone who actually wants to know the supreme truth must seek out the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So these are just a smattering of the verses that have to do with the process of accepting a spiritual master. There was a devotee named Subhananda who collected an entire book of quotes about the spiritual master. So they are legion. Everywhere you look, you see the necessity and the purpose and the qualifications and the method by which one can and should accept a bona fide spiritual master. So in this way, this one topic is quite broad, and we don't have time to really do it justice today, but we've given sort of some of the more prominent verses, and what I would like to do is at this point see if any of you have any questions or comments about the important concept of accepting a spiritual master. Yes, Nara. The question is, who's going to ask the question?
As you said, Maharaj, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada was explaining how the spiritual master engages the disciple according to his tendencies and nature. And I was practically thinking, like let's say someone comes to the temple to live for some period, and actually a big part of his day is engaged in we could say Brahminical activities, because this is the nature of the temple. So sometimes in the beginning it may be a little bit too much.
Right, right.
And my question in this regard will be, is it just if in the beginning, according to the person, the notice cut some part of his intellectual tendencies and engage more the devotee more in just physical work and physical activities, and also how it was in the beginning days of Krishna consciousness. If you can share.
Well, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, it was kind of one size fits all, you know. I remember when I first moved into temple, there was a thing known as the laundry merge. What that was is that everybody put all their dhotis, kopans, and everything into one big ball, and then it was all washed, and then first come, first serve. You know? So you didn't even have clothes that were assigned to your body. You know. So Needless to say, ISKCON evolved beyond that point. And of course, then we had as we used to call them, sacred socks, where you didn't have any two that matched. And so it was known that Hare Krishna devotees always had mismatching socks, and it was kind of a sort of humorous aspect of the movement. But at any rate, the point is that in the early days, and for that matter, even now, we understand that in the Narada Pancharatra, it mentions the basic system for how a person develops their devotional life, which is what our whole daily program is based on. Prabhupada didn't just make it up. It's actually there about rising early, attending Mongol Artik, about fasting. We see that in Rupa Goswami's Nectar of Devotion, we touched on that a little bit. There are all these basic things. In the long run, one will certainly, if they can hang on to it, become Brahminical by following these standards. But we will see also that there are people who can't exactly follow those standards. And now we're getting into Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, where we have these different circles where Krishna explains, I think it's in 12:9, that one should always think of me. That's the center. And of course, if you can't do that, he tells Arjuna, then one should engage in the practice of devotional service. In this way, one will develop a desire to attain to me. So that's the process we know of as sadhana bhakti. So sadhana bhakti is the process of engaging in activities that we don't spontaneously feel like doing, at least not all of them. Some of them we might, but not all of the activities in devotional service we have any feeling for the Supreme, or we have any real true deep knowledge of why we're doing them. But we do them anyway because they're the regimen or the regulation, and they've been given to us by the spiritual master. And but there's a step below that, and that is just work for me. So in the future, as Krishna consciousness goes broader out, there'll be a lot more people in that category of those who really can't follow the regulative principles, and certainly are not able to always think of Krishna, but they can work for Krishna. And so in the purport in Bhagavad Gita, I think that's 12:11 or thereabouts, Prabhupada explains that every organization needs capital and so on and so forth. And so somebody can't follow the regular principles, but they like Krishna, they like kirtan, so they come and they engage in kirtan. And they may be farmers like, out there in Gita Nagari or somewhere else, or they may be people who are professional and they offer some aspect of what they do for the Supreme, et cetera, et cetera. So in this way, that's kind of how I would respond to your question, that there is a basic formula, and pretty much everybody is going through that formula, but eventually people will be settled into some kind of service. They'll become a book distributor, they'll become a manager, they'll become a pujari, they'll become a cook, or whatever it happens to be. And they will follow the rest of their sadhana around that if they live in the temple. But most people will wind up moving out of the temple and become married, and then they will have their quote-unquote occupation in the outside world, and they will contribute to Krishna consciousness in various different ways. So that's the practicality of it. And but the longer that you can hold on to the Brahminical activities, the less garbage of the material world you'll actually have to get dragged through. So if one is able to stay with Brahminical activities, then one will not necessarily have to live outside the temple, will not necessarily go through that. But, that's there too. And one manages to hang on to it very long, even when they become married, the good habits will already be established, and even in the outside world, even in married life, one can engage in reasonable spiritual life and add much to the process of preaching and et cetera, et cetera. Yes, Gopal Chandra.
Something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's a big topic, so I guess I'll just take a little piece out of that. In the fourth canto, the pastime Dhruva Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada mentions in one place that generally the Siksha Guru becomes the Diksha Guru.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there seems to be a big imbalance of that in our society.
A big what?
Imbalance of Diksha
Right,
Guru
right.
being the Siksha Guru, or Siksha Guru being the Diksha Guru, where we have maybe thousands of Siksha Gurus, but I think less than 100 Diksha Gurus.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we understand this, and where is the balance?
Well, probably you know that the whole idea of Diksha and what is meant by that in ISKCON is in the present process of a lot of controversy of exactly how it's to be carried out and what it actually means, how one becomes a Diksha Guru, who's eligible, who decides whether the GBC should be involved or not. In general, that's the process. Whatever you want to say, at the very end of the day, that person who inspires someone to start Krishna consciousness and continue in Krishna consciousness is a person's guru. You can that person may be in the office of a Diksha Guru and able then to give initiation, or that person may not be. But our movement being a collective movement, as opposed to the original, Śrimad Bhāgavatam Vedic system was that you had a guru, and he might have lived, on a mountaintop or in a cave or something like that, and some disciples would come and he would train them up, and one of them he would depute to be the next, leader. But that doesn't lend itself to an organization. And that's what, even back as far as Jiva Goswami, he started the idea of the Vishva Vaishnava Raja Sabha, which is this concept that, we're trying to cover the earth with Krishna consciousness. We don't want just one guru here in this cave and another one over there in that cave. We want a collective movement. So when you talk about a collective Krishna conscious movement, which is what Jiva Goswami had in mind, and of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati changed the name to the Gaudiya Math, and then Prabhupada changed the name to ISKCON. So this idea, of course, there are people who are engaging in spiritual life that are not part of ISKCON or not part of even the Gaudiya Math, but whatever. But the whole point is that to have a, Sherwin-Williams cover the earth concept, then to do that, we need an organization, a worldwide organization, and that means adjusting things, because generally, if you have a one guru mat system, then whatever that guru says is right, and he's the final say. There's no organization needed other than he tells his disciples what to do. That's simple. But of course, if he goes off, then so do all of his disciples, and that's a problem. And when you have a collective society, then there has to be some surrender of each individual guru to a larger society. So we have the GBC. And then within the society, you have to have some kind. And, you know, there are many devotees who feel differently, but personally I feel that unless there is some vetting of people who are hanging out a shingle to be a bona fide spiritual master within ISKCON, then many people will be misled, because at least in my experience, having done the ISKCON Disciples course, I know many people who take the ISKCON Disciples course have already decided on their guru way before they took the course. So what they made their decision on, I don't know. Sometimes I do know, and it scares me. but the point is that accepting a spiritual master is not a fan club, or it could be a mystical experience. Of course, we ourselves, we accepted Prabhupada and many others who were around at an earlier time. We also accepted Prabhupada. And we may or may not have known much about Prabhupada at that time, but in the end, our decision turned out to be okay. But for those who are not maybe as thoughtful or deep, then it seems reckless to me to not have, the GBC doesn't necessarily vouchsafe that once a person has been vetted, that they are guru no matter what they do. That's not the point. But the GBC will give the final veto on a person if they feel that there is some, outstanding problem with their sadhana or whatever it is, So in this way, a person has at least the idea that from the institutional point of view, a person has gone through some accreditation. Like in a college, it isn't just anybody can say, okay, I'd like to teach mathematics. Do you have an open room? It doesn't work like that. You have to go through some kind of accreditation, by a board of regents or whatever they may be in a college setting. So every organization has some incumbent responsibility to see that people aren't misled within that organization, or people aren't abused in that organization. ISKCON is waking up to that more and more. But at any rate, I think that it's not correct to think of the guru as just a figurehead that connects the disciple to the parampara. Of course, that's one function that he does, because it seems like the guru is far more than that, that he's the person that the disciple actually places their real faith in. When a person becomes attracted to Krishna consciousness, it is because they see the character of an individual, and that person is very important. Now, what you might have also been referring to is the fact that, generally speaking, within ISKCON, the Diksha Guru is not the person that tells the disciple what the different 12 tilak marks are and where they are and how they're supposed to be applied. He doesn't train the disciple in how to cook chapatis or what the morning prayer is. Generally other people do that. So probably, I would say 95% of everything we learn is through Shiksha Gurus in ISKCON. We learn all these details of what to do, what not to do. And from another point of view, I was noticing and thinking about it as we were reading today's verse in the purport, that the spiritual master chooses the service for the disciple. We see generally it's the temple presidents that do that. That they're the ones that probably are in a better situation to grasp, what the disciple is gifted towards or tending towards, and they wind up doing that. So that's another, whole issue there. But theoretically, it's the spiritual master, but, we have an organization, and because it's an organization, a worldwide organization, certain things are and have to be adjusted to a certain degree. So maybe I spoke to your question or not. I don't know whether it was in the same thing that you were.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was curious about this first person nectar instruction. The Swami talks about controlling the tongue, the belly, and the genitals. I was wondering if you could give me like a better understanding about the difference between controlling the tongue and the belly. Like, of course, the tongue
Right.
eating, but then the belly also be eating. I was wondering.
Right. They're both involved in eating, but the tongue is the desire to taste a multitude of wonderful flavors, so because we want to taste this, we want to taste that. The tongue is doing that. But then because we haven't controlled the tongue, then we eat more and more. And so the belly may be even saying, no more, but the tongue is saying yes. So, so that's a little bit of a difference there. So by the tongue, of course, sometimes it's the belly that wants to eat. The tongue is not really attracted by a particular food, but the belly is feeling some, gnawing sense of needing something or another. So the belly then decides the desire to eat some more. So all those things are involved: tongue, belly, and then. If one eats too much, then one will generally become agitated. Yeah. Okay.
It's just kind of along the lines of Gopal question, but more specifically about Yaksha Gurus and Shiksha Gurus. There's also this idea that I've come across from devotees and also in the Vedic literature that the guru is eternal. That the guru is not necessarily just a person, but like it's something else that's beyond, bodies, beyond time, beyond space. So I kind of wanted to understand more like what that is. Like I talked to a devotee recently who said, it doesn't matter what guru you accept, all the gurus in this kind are fine. And one of them. Ultimately, they're all the same. Like it's the same message, the same transmission.
Well, guru is one. That's definitely there. However, if you ask even in a regular setting 20 different devotees what you should do with your life, you'll get 20 different answers. That's the practical, that's the practical reality of it. So the guru is one in the sense that the guru delivers the essence of the Vedic philosophy, and all gurus should be identical in that. We have our Siddhanta, and a person isn't delivering Siddhanta, they're not guru. If they are delivering Siddhanta, they are guru. But there are many details, as we read in that section from the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 6, how to perform devotional service. The nature of what Rupa Goswami is saying there is, we heard Prabhupada describe it in his translation, that how a person decides, when Guru says one thing and another person says something else, how to actually deal or handle that situation. And these things are discussed in the ISKCON Disciples Course. In general, the people who are organizing the disciples' life, namely the guru and the temple managers, should be harmonious in their view of things and give the disciple concurrent and similar instructions. If they're giving them completely different instructions, then it becomes a problem. And it does and can happen, It can and does happen sometimes. So the guru is a principle, but he's also an individual. So we are not just following a principle. We are following a particular individual who may have specific instructions just for us. Whereas the principle is, or the Shastras are kind of covering the general bases. So both things have to be there. We can't be too focused on just one individual, otherwise we become a personality cult. On the other side of the coin, we can't be too focused on just the broad strokes, or we kind of lose the customization or the tailorization of Krishna consciousness to a particular individual. That has to be there too. I don't know if I spoke to your question or not, but I tried to do my best there. Okay, I think Fred has a question. Oh, but it's getting late. Okay, so thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Śrimad Bhāgavatam, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna. What?